Welcome to the Diamond Hands podcast, a TDR podcast and a division of the Dales Media Group. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Before we get into today's podcast, I want to mention that all views on the Diamond Hands podcast and the guests on this podcast are purely opinion. You should not treat any opinions expressed by us or our guests as investment advice. The views on this podcast are solely intended to be informational and are not investment advice. Joining me is Anthony Varrell, millennial entrepreneur. Anthony, how are things?
I think things are good. Things are good. As you know, I like being right. I've been writing a lot of shit the last week.
You have
a lot of the weeks prior, but yeah, it feels good when everything starts moving in tandem.
I know. Lots to talk about. And look who's back, Jack. Benjamin A. Smith, lead financial writer from TDR. Ben, how's things?
Things are okay. I must admit I did get hit by a little bit of an illness over the last week or two, but now I am back at full capacity and ready to do the show again.
All right, brother. Well, it's good to have you back. As I said, lots to talk about, gents. So I guess we'll get started in the crypto space. Anthony, about a week and a half ago, you attended NTF.NYC. Big event, really big event from what you said off camera. So if I'm outside looking in, I guess what was the big takeaway from the event while you're there all week?
My biggest takeaway was that NFTs are going to pretty much eat the world. I mean, the conversation about everything from ticketing to music royalties to community building to utility. I mean, the NFT and the smart contract is really how the world's going to evolve into Web3. I mean, unlike Web2, with Web3, you're not creating a profile on these platforms such as Google, Shopify, etc. You own your profile. You plug into the website. You have your IP. You have your bankroll, and you transact on the websites. And then you can take your profile and plug it in elsewhere. That future's here. There's a lot of insights over the week of brands, of on-ramps that are bringing people into the crypto ecosystem. And I mean, just all bullishness around NFTs in general. It was great meeting with everybody from fund managers to projects to some unicorns out there. It was a great week in New York.
You think there's some complication? Like, how is that going to work exactly? I guess on a very general level about how you own your profile and all that. How is that different than the current sort of Web2 version of how we do things?
So I mean, so for instance, yeah. So for instance, right now I go to Saks Fifth Avenue. If I want to go buy my items, check out, I need to put in my email address. I need to put in my credit card number. I need to put in my personal information. It then goes into their database. They've now got my data. They own my profile, and that profile, there's no congruency across the internet. With Web3 and with the current crypto and the NFT ecosystem, if I go to OpenSea, if I go to the Bored Apes Yacht Club website, if I go to Nifty Gateway, I'm not creating a profile, and I can't forge or create any sort of counterfeit information. I plug in with my MetaMask. It's pegged to my Ethereum address, and now it's pegged to my ENS domain, which is my personal Ethereum address. So right now it's avarel.eth is how I'm transacting on the internet. I go to a website, I plug in, it's authenticated. You know it's me. I transact, I unplug, and then I go elsewhere. It's much more transparent and it's much more congruent. And I now own all of my data on my profile.
Okay, quick question here, but don't the corporations hate this, like Facebook, like Twitter, like Google? Because if they're not playing the middleman anymore, if you own your own data and own your own information out there, don't you cut out all the those type of players? And how they feel about this?
Of course,
are they going to try to stun?
I mean, of course they do. And I mean, Web3, it's an interesting dichotomy. I mean, you either get on the train or you're going to get your lunch eaten. I mean, the concept is here. I mean, people are transacting on Web3. People enjoy the ecosystem of Web3, and they like owning their own data. I mean, the decentralization of everything is happening. It's going to continue to happen. It's in its infancy. And I mean, you're going to see players like Google, players like Facebook. I mean, they're going to conform or they're going to get their lunch eaten because, I mean, while I don't mind them having all of my data, I mean, I do prefer to own my user profile and own my digital identity, which 100%. Is now becoming your wallet.
And this is long overdue as well. Like, how many concerns has there been globally about data protection? And you wonder, okay, how does that change? But this is a clear example. You're starting to get a sneak peek as to what the future is going to look like.
Yeah, and to be honest, from a marketing perspective, for instance, if your Web3 profile it's open sourced. I mean, if you're on the Ethereum blockchain, you can go on there and see with the different hashes where I'm transacting, what I'm doing, etc. So think about it this way. Right now, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Anthony Varrell, me personally, I have a different profile on each of those websites. With Web3, I plug in and my congruent profile now comes with me from website to website to website, and it is the exact same thing. It's so much more efficient. Yeah, it's so much more efficient. And it's decentralizing everything, which is what we're working towards if you're involved in crypto or in NFTs right now.
And no one's selling your data to other corporations without your knowledge.
And no one's selling your data.
No, exactly. It's where technology is going. I mean, you're starting to see a migration from Web 2 to Web 3, and it's the inflection point happened to be kicked off with NFTs and with the like. But it's gonna spread to everything. I mean, you've got Stripe, you've got Nike, you've got Coca-Cola. They're all MasterCard. They're all going into crypto and NFTs. So I mean, you're going to see user adoption at scale once these players start to come into the space.
Well, I want to ask here. Let's provide some examples when people are still learning about the NFT space. Well, this week Gary Vaynerchuk came on and basically said that the whole music industry is going to get turned upside down. That you're going to see obviously royalties involved for artists, and at the same time too, individual people are going to own a stake within that NFT. But let's provide somebody and walk them through where the music industry is today and how, say, NFTs will turn upside down, with this example being one, knowing that Gary Vee had talked about this.
Yeah, so I mean, the best example is probably in the past few weeks, Lil Pump, the rapper. He did an NFT launch for it was either a single or an album that's coming up. He minted the set. He then he raised about 500,000 in fiat, and the NFT holders have the rights to fractional shares of the royalties on the music that he's creating moving forward. So I mean, people are sharing in the IP and in the royalties, and at the same time, he's also generating capital. So I mean, if you're a company, that could be tremendously profitable. So Nike comes out with a new line of Jordans. And I mean, while they're not in the business of selling their IP because it is coveted, and they are a cash cow, I mean, in theory, if Nike wants to launch, or any company in general wants to launch a new product, if you want to crowdfund it per se, and then sell a portion of the royalties and of the IP in perpetuity to who are eventually going to be your consumers, you then create a platform, launch an NFT, raise the capital, then deploy that capital into your infrastructure. And the NFTs are going to be those placeholders to your, we'll call them investors, even though I really don't like using that word, on a go forward basis. And me being the NFT holder,
which is so much more efficient.
It's so much more efficient. I can either sell that NFT, I can transfer that NFT, or I hold it and I reap the benefits in perpetuity and passive income.
Yeah. Well, Jimmy Fallon, he got into the news as well. He bought his first NFT from one of the biggest NFT communities. So again, we're all about educating here. Bored Ape Yacht Club. That's one of the biggest NFT communities going on right now. He purchased through a platform called MoonPay, which is similar to, say, PayPal, for in and around $216,000. So just when you thought, Anthony, that the momentum in this space is quickly building, this could take it to a whole new level, knowing the ongoing guests that he has on. The conversation each night during his show. You bring pop culture into it. Plus, he's got 50 million followers on Twitter. So what was your takeaway from that?
I love it. I mean, it's the Bored Ape message and the Bored Ape platform just got amplified 10x. Jimmy Fallon's a good advocate to have. I mean, he's a good person to have in the community and in the ecosystem. And I mean, he kind of tipped the scales to another bull run. I mean, a lot of people thought NFTs have been in a bear market. I mean, I've got certain ones that I purchased for, let's say, 5.5 Ethereum that I watched drip down to, let's say, 3.8, which was the floor. That was as of Thursday evening. The floor right now is up to 5.8 on the mutants. On the Bored Apes, the floors went from 32 to, I think it was well above 42 as of this morning. So, I mean, you're seeing appreciation across the board. And there's a lot of people out there right now that think Bored Apes, the OG collection, are going to flip CryptoPunks. And CryptoPunks are about 100 Ethereum right now on the floor. So, I mean, if you're implying there's 2.5x upside on the Bored Apes, I mean, while that is a steep buried entry at 42 Ethereum each, I mean, there is upside. And I mean, when you're looking at Bored Apes, when I was in New York, they had a concert called Ape Fest. So this was free to attend. All you have to do is be a Bored Ape holder. This was Lil Baby, The Strokes, Beck, Chris Rock, and other performers that were performing for free. Absolutely for free. All you had to do and your key in was being a Bored Ape holder. So, I mean, there is utility. There is real world use case. And, I mean, it's a brand. Rolling Stone came out with a cover 2 weeks ago that were limited. I actually happened to buy one. I bought it for $50. They're reselling right now on eBay for $700. Now, I'm not even thinking about selling it. I'm framing it and putting it on the wall in my office just to go with all my other Bored Ape relics. After the Jimmy Fallon news, I completed my set on my OG apes. So now I have the Bored Ape, the M1, and the M2 mutants. And if you look at the previous sales,
these are all NFT communities, correct?
Yeah. Bored Apes and mutant apes are NFT communities. Yeah. But a lot of people are theorizing that the real value moving forward is going to having the set. So I have my Bored Ape, I have my M1 mutant, and I have my M2 mutant, which completes a set, and the further utility down the road is yet to be seen. But I mean, the sets have been selling in excess of 150 Ethereum as of recent.
Wow. So when you moved, like you talked about the floor move from 3.8 to 5.8. If I'm new to this, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah. So in the NFT world, a floor is what the minimum price is right now on the market. So what you see is when these collections get momentum and when buyers come in, what they call sweep the floor. So if I see the floor is at 3.8 and I start to think that the floor is going to appreciate, I go in there and just start scooping up the cheapest apes that are available. I saw funds doing that last week. There was someone that bought 90 of them in one fell swoop. There was another buyer that I think bought 30 of them in a lot. So people come in and sweep the floor, and then it's a snowball effect. So I mean, while the floors can be volatile, as you've seen, 5.8 is pretty much where we were at a couple of months ago before everything started to go really into a bear market and Ethereum started to rip to the upside, which took a lot of the liquidity out of the NFT market.
Ben, this is wild, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's almost like this wild west of like this new technology and this new independence with these smart contracts and just owning your own data. And it's very exciting. It's very exciting. It's a much better way of doing things. So even people like myself who aren't totally involved at this point or are still kind of looking at things, to me, it jumps out that it makes more sense than the way we do things right now. So I can see myself jumping into it at any point once that critical mass of understanding how everything works sort of materializes. I'm definitely ready to start making investments and start taking ownership of my own data online.
Yeah, and I mean, with the apes also, I would consider the apes probably a blue chip IP play, aside from all of the other utility and the value that they bring. Because if you look at what happened this week, Universal Records actually signed 4 Bored Apes to a music deal. So I mean, what they're going to do is they're going to form a group such as the Gorillas back in the early 2000s, and it's going to be branded and anchored by the Bored Apes IP. So I mean, this is like buying into like
these are like the new record label companies, kind of like the record label 2.0 or 3.0.
Yeah, you've got, I mean, from an IP perspective, you've got Jenkins the Valet that signed a deal with CAA for the IP. You've now got Kingship, which is the band on Universal Records. I mean, Bored Apes, the IP is spreading throughout the mainstream media and throughout the mainstream entertainment world.
Do you ever think they'll go public, Anthony? Like Bored Apes? Do you ever think they'll conglomerate and go public?
No.
Or
no,
it's not that type of okay.
It's not that type of deal. It's not that type of community. And I mean, it's individual ownership. It's like owning a Picasso. It's like, but there happens to be a collection of 10,000 of them. But the IP is applicable. If I wanted to make shirts right now or make a clothing line out of my Bored Ape, I can. I own the IP. And that IP is getting more valuable by the day, judging by what people are willing to pay for in the market.
Okay, so let's wrap up this portion of the podcast. Why is this important for people watching this, and what should they do about it? And I don't want to give them advice on what they should and should be doing, but if you were to make new to the space, why is this important? What would you do?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't financial advice. This isn't investing advice. But I mean, NFTs are here. NFTs are an investable asset class. And I mean, NFTs are more than just art. It's not some stupid fucking picture of a cat or a monkey or a lion that's in a JPEG form with some guys trying to raise some money and rug pull some retail investors. I mean, getting into the blue chips, you're owning IP, you're owning part of a community. And I mean, a lot of these blue chip projects are starting to generate ecosystems and economies, such as the apes. They're going to be introducing staking in Q1 of next year. So with my war chest of mutants and with my OG Bored Ape, if I stake them, I'm going to generate passive yield in coins from their DAO. Those coins are going to have an intrinsic value moving forward. So I'm getting dividends on a daily basis and monthly basis just by owning membership in the community as well as the IP. I'd be looking for, I mean, I don't know if there's going to be another Bored Ape brand. I don't know if there's going to be, who's going to be the next Bored Ape, but I mean, taking NFT seriously in the gaming sector as well as in the art world sector. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity out there, but you got to do your own research and figure out where you want to and what you're comfortable with putting in. Because I mean, I've bought NFTs myself that have went to zero. So I mean,
I'm starting my own NFT right after. I'm starting my own NFT right after this podcast. What do you think?
I think that's advice that I wouldn't give somebody. Just starting up your own NFT and thinking it's just starting up your own NFT for personal financial gain as well as just spur of the moment stuff is what's seen as bad actors in this sector. If you have a genuine use case, if you have IP and if you have a platform and a brand, I would
just wild this industry. Another example of like how the world is changing so rapidly, and the corporate, baby boomer executive, his days are on the clock as this world continues to change so much, and it's a welcome change too. Let's switch to cannabis, and it appears the bulls are running. We haven't said that very often in the last, I don't know, let's just say I've been counting a long time. So we're hearing lots of chatter about how the Safe Banking Act is going to be included in the NDAA, and more optimism is growing. Do you think we're in the middle of a rally, Ben?
Well, me and Anthony were talking off camera before the show, and absolutely. If I look at the charts, you could very, very clearly see that there's a sea change of a momentum shift, right? And that is like we had the highest daily volume early last week, like double over any day of any previous day this year. Higher.
So what do you think changed?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question, because I don't know if anything out in the.
Do you think it was just this is like low enough and time to get in?
Nothing changed,
Ben. I think so. Yeah. I mean, I don't think when I follow the news flow, I don't perceive that anything changed. I think, there's a congresswoman named Mary Brown who's going to introduce something into the States Act, but that's still in Congress right now. So I think that's the only piece of news that I could see that maybe sort of added fuel to the fire. But from a purely technical point of view, it just looked like somebody decided to either cover or initiate position. Volume was double, like I said, on the daily, more than any other day this year. Yeah. On the hourly, it went like 3x over any other hourly bar. So it was very clear that momentum changed after like 9 or 10 months of all these rallies being sold and stocks coming down, continuously. People expecting tax loss selling. The switch flipped. And you could clearly see that on the volume profile, and now sentiment is out the window. Like when you're looking at social media, everybody's bullish now, and everybody's expecting a rally. Yeah. Everybody, all these chartist videos are coming up saying that the momentum has switched. So what remains to be seen is how far we go now, or whether it settles into sort of, a top range and people sort of wait and see whether safe banking is included in the NDAA.
Anthony, did you add it to your position at all last week? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually topped off my positions in Curaleaf, GTI, and Trulieve. And I bought MSOS options. It was funny because I was talking to my partner, Burger, on Friday, and we were like, dude, this feels fucking great. We're like, we've literally dealt with like 9 to 10 months of just a slog down and just watching multiples and watching the prices dwindle. And we're like, to see GTI up 24% in a week was just refreshing. To see the volume
what are you
on
anticipating
MSOS
this week then?
Was refreshing. I mean, while some of the earnings releases last week, I mean, not to get too bullish, but I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if we see MSOS clip 40. I mean, if you talk about hive mentality and network effects, I don't think we've seen anything greater than what happens to cannabis stocks when these things get hype and run. And I mean, if you start to see more big money or smart money start to come into the space, I mean, it's insanely undervalued.
Yes.
People are on notice looking at these earnings reports. They're still growing, they're still profitable, and there's still market share out there to gobble up. I mean, I'm really pumped to see Trulieve and Verano lead off the week this week, Monday, Tuesday.
I don't know how much of an earnings play
there.
this has really been, just because you saw a couple of the big players guide down, which wasn't a surprise. Cresco, for example, some of their distribution business that they're clearing out of California led to, I think, about 13 million lower than consensus in revenues, and Curaleaf guided down a little bit on the revenues, but some of the other ones were in line. So it's not really an earnings play thing. I think this, there's some sort of switch. It's sort of hard to pinpoint exactly what it was, but somebody's making a big bet that this is going to be included. Safe's going to be included in the NDAA. So I look at what's happening now as sort of like a binary bet that things have gotten low, and somebody expects that maybe this is going to be included. Now, whether it is or not, it's sort of red or black at this point, given that all the regulatory, misfirings have happened in the past. And I think that's the risk that each individual investor has to take. If you bought the low, great.
Okay, so $64,000 question. If it you guys can't answer the question of whether or not it's going to be included in the NDAA because you don't know. Timeline-wise, though, if it is included, what are we looking at?
No. Oh, I mean, if it's included. Sorry, go ahead, Anthony.
But when will that decision be made as to whether or not it's going to be included? That's what I'm trying to wonder and find out.
If it's included, I mean, the
NDAA, but once it's passed through it, are we looking at a month, 2 months, 3 months? Yeah.
I mean, I have no idea. All you need is the NDAA to get passed, and then, I mean, safe banking is coming. I mean, if the NDAA passes and safe banking is included, it's done. Like, there's no more if, it's when. It's passed. It will be put into working legislation, and I mean, we finally are going to be able to use banks. I mean, if that happens, I think all these stocks start to hit their price targets. If not, eclipse them. Because you're going to have family offices, you're going to have smart money that wants exposure to the sector just start to pile in. And I mean, that wall of money is sitting there. I mean, you've got guys like Tim Seymour and Steve Grasso and CNBC that it's all these guys do. They talk to fund managers and they talk to the smart money on Wall Street, and they have said time and time again that there is a wall of money that is sitting there waiting to come into the
Tyler
cannabis
Berline,
sector.
he
and that Safe Banking Act
well
is
respected within the
catalyst.
cannabis industry. He's actually on the board with MJ Biz, and he posted recently on LinkedIn about how JP Morgan is no longer taking transactions related to the cannabis industry, and he said, "Don't let the title fool you." Exactly. But what were you going to say?
No. I mean, so Bank of America and JP Morgan told their portfolio managers and wealth managers they can't buy cannabis stocks. They weren't buying U.S. cannabis stocks anyway, so who the fuck cares? I mean, if they couldn't, they couldn't have bought Trulieve, Cresco, Curaleaf.
Yeah, that was just completely misdirection,
I mean,
because they weren't buying these stocks anyway, right?
So
they were very, very minor players into it.
I mean, that was
people weren't using their platforms, brokerage platforms to really buy it. So this was all kind of misdirection and fodder for the bears to come out and say, these clients of these big banks aren't buying these shares, but they weren't even involved anyway, right? So it's more misdirection.
An effort to draw the share price lower for a better entry point, correct?
No. Yeah. I mean, if that was their thesis and that's what they were trying to achieve, they did it beautifully. Because I mean, they took these stocks and just hammered them into
earnings
the ground.
coming up earlier this week are coming up this week with Trulieve and Verano. So it'll be interesting to see, and we'll keep a close eye. Let's focus now on psychedelics. First off, Wonderland Miami. I know you didn't get a chance to obviously go down, Ben, but obviously, Anthony, you were there. What'd you think? What was your big takeaway from the conference?
I thought it was good. I mean, I thought it was insightful. I mean, it reminded me a lot of cannabis in like 2015, 2016. You had like the purists that were like the hippies and the shaman on the psychedelic spectrum that were there. And then you also had a bunch of suits and a bunch of biotech guys that were there as well. I mean, I think that there is a big intersection that's going to happen between the two, because I mean, I think that's going to need to happen, especially if you're going to get mass adoption and acceptance of these psychedelic compounds. But I mean, the one thing that I was surprised with, and I mean, it was coming from a lot of the smart money, is they know they need Big Pharma. They need Big Pharma to come in. They need Big Pharma dollars to come in. They need their distribution. They need their R&D. They need their marketing dollars, and they need their ecosystem. And they all said on stage,
and I'm hearing too that they are going to come in, and sooner rather than later,
come into the sector. I was very surprised. They are. Yeah, I forget who it was, but one of the managing partners of the Conscious Fund a couple months ago, when I was listening to him on a panel at a conference, he was like, "This is our thesis. Every big pharma company across the globe has a psychedelics division in the next 3 to 5 years. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Like, these compounds can potentially succeed or supersede SSRIs and benzos. They can be applied to other neurodegenerative diseases as well as CNS diseases. And I mean, those addressable markets are massive. I think there's going to be a reckoning if that happens with Big Pharma, because a lot of the purists and a lot of the indigenous tribes and a lot of the people that really brought these compounds full circle want nothing to do with Big Pharma. And I mean, while I think that Big Pharma is a necessary evil, I think
you're right on that. There's a lot of
open arms by everybody.
There's a lot of parallels I see in the industry too. Psychedelics with the way cannabis was, say, circa 2014, 2015, where you had a lot of resistance with the rise of canopy, Aurora in Canada, where they were vilified, right? A lot of the original users, a lot of people who owned head shops resisted big cannabis, and they didn't want anything to do with them. And they, but over time, everybody recognized that that's where big business was going, right? And I think the psychedelics sector is the same way, where you have the purists, you have the people who have been using or who have done ayahuasca, things like that, who are sort of resisting and vilifying Big Pharma. But at the end of the day, people need, for this sector to develop, it needs Big Pharma money. It needs, it's going to take like $80 to $100 million just to get a drug through phase 3, and that's it. That's just one compound of many in a pipeline, right? So, So, I mean, the resistance is there, and it's sort of similar to what we saw in cannabis. But at the end of the day, Big Pharma is going to win out, and they're going to get in the industry, as you say, maybe 3 or 5 years, maybe even less. Who knows?
Ben, you're a psychedelic. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing, also one of the takeaways that I got from the conference is there were people there actually on psychedelics. Like, there were people there that you could see were under the influence of some heavy shit. There were a lot of people that I saw there with like DMT pens and like stuff like that. And I mean, that is not recreationally accepted. Like, I don't think there's a time and place for heavy psychedelics. I mean, there's a lot of people that condone using them. There's a lot of people that thoroughly enjoy using them and think that it has its place in culture. But I mean, openly doing heavy
100%.
psychedelics at a conference is going to cause more harm than good, by far. It's not cannabis. Hitting a DMT pen, which I've never done and I probably won't ever do.
A lot stronger. It's
not
a lot
like hitting a
trippier
fucking
than
vape pen at a cannabis
you're going
conference.
to a way different place.
It's completely different. Yeah. That is, to me, that is a very, very slippery slope, and it's a very, very dangerous thing, because if you have someone freak out on psychedelics at a psychedelic conference,
so I spoke to one of the doctors at one of the bigger
for
publicly
the
traded
social
companies.
acceptance
I'm like, what are we
of the
doing
sector.
right, but what would you see change? He's like, first off, we can't have conferences with the name Wonderland and expect to get Big Pharma interest. 2, we can't have mushrooms on people's websites. So I think that you're really going to start to see a shift where this becomes more biomedical over the coming years. I think that was a big education point if this industry does get serious and takes off. Do you not think?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I agree with that completely. I mean, having rainbows and butterflies and a bunch of mushrooms looks like Alice in Wonderland. I mean, it's great for branding. I mean, I understand that it softens the blow, because I've been to a biotech conference before. It's very sanitized, and it's a very, I don't want to say hostile environment, but it kind of sucked. So, I mean, that branding and that likeness really softened the topic at hand, but that's got to go. I mean, if we're talking about transitioning and transforming the mental health sector, and I mean, really taking control of SSRIs and benzos, et cetera, I mean, it's a biomedical industry that is going to need to be taken very,
as Big
very
Pharma gets
seriously.
into, I wouldn't
it's
be
not a
at
street
all
drug, and
surprised
it's not a
to see,
recreational application of a compound.
The conference circuit sort of morph into the JP Morgan healthcare conference, and the bigger companies that are going to succeed, the ones that are going to break away, like the Compass Pathways, probably Thai. Of the world, Cybins of the world, they're going to end up joining these conferences, like JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, the ones with the big healthcare conferences, and they're going to join them once Big Pharma starts to get more involved, once it becomes more data centric. And, I know Patrick's done a great job with Wonderland and all that, but I wouldn't be surprised if, as the sector matures, it becomes more of a traditional straight biopharma existence, the way biomedical companies, go to conferences right now.
Well, as Doug Drysdale told me this week in an interview, the days of 5-year-old soccer are over, where you have this whole crowd of kids chasing after a ball. Well, it's like one stock is not necessarily going to reflect the entire industry. It's going to start to move on its own versus, say, other companies in the space. We clearly had a run-up and then a sell-off going into this week. Ben, there was a lot of optimism and a lot of positive feedback based on Compass's endpoint results related to their phase 2B. You look at it a little bit differently. Why is that?
Well, no, I look at it from a perspective where, Compass is a clear leader. It's still a very junior sector. So it's going to, we're going to play follow the leader with a lot of the small companies right now until it gets to a more mature place, right? So the way I look at the Compass results, I think they were very successful. I think, the MADRS scores that they used to show the depression were alleviated off just a single dose of Comp 360 pretty highly at the 25 milligram level, right? What I don't think is that it was like slam dunk where you could look at this and say, okay, this is going to be a frontline treatment. This is like absolutely no doubts there, because there were some adverse effects at the 25 milligram level. For example, the 10 milligram level was pretty ineffective in a lot of ways to show some of these scores. And
one dosage though, right, Ben? Just one dosage? Like in comparison to, say, SSRIs that you're taking every single day, do you not think that was kind of promising based on the feedback?
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I'm not negative on the results at all. I think all I'm saying is that I don't think that there were the slam dunk results that what you get, where it's a high dosage, no adverse effects. Even the lower dosage shows a sliding scale of effects, but still shows a powerful effect. You didn't really get that. So I'm not negative. I think, the Compass results were really good, but I think if you look at the amount of patients who took the dosages at all levels, and the amount of people who experience that, statistically significant reduction in depression scores, I think it was only around 12 or 15%. Now, as the trial designs go on, as they look to extract their dosages, the dosages in the amounts that are clearly more effective, I think things are going to get better. And so I think it was very promising.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think it was like a slam dunk where you could look at it and then, the trial results to raise all boats. That's kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah, and I think you're onto something there. Anthony, you and I were in Miami last week. There was rumors swirling leading up to Monday that something big was coming down. Well, it ended up being Cybin in their latest endpoint results related to their leading compound CYB003, which is a molecule that is equivalent to psilocybin and the effectiveness of it all. There was expectation that this was going to be a big announcement. Do you think people were let down a little bit by the significance of it all? Like, what was your takeaway from Cybin's announcement on Monday?
Yeah, I mean, my honest takeaway of it shouldn't have been talked up. It should have just been a simple press release. That's it. That's all it warranted. It didn't warrant some grandiose presentation at Wonderland. I mean, the stock was reflective of what the market thought of it. I still like Cybin on a go-forward basis. I mean, like I've said before on past episodes, they've got capital and they've got IP, and unfortunately in this sector that wins. But I'd probably like to see less gaslighting moving forward and more just head down.
What a day we had though in that yacht,
and focus on the company.
What a day. We're going to be posting more content. A lot of optimism, that's for sure.
Yeah, and
learned a lot about the industry too. And then not too bad, obviously, taking it. Yeah, a lot of institutions are actually more interested in psychedelics than they are in cannabis, which I found surprising when we were down there.
Yeah. It's like we keep saying, it's because 100%. Psychedelics, medicinal. Cannabis is a CPG. I mean, no matter how you want to say it, cannabis, yes, it has medicinal aspects. Cannabis is it's a CPG. Like, that's it. It is what it is. Psychedelics can transform the way that we tackle and potentially cure mental illness. As far as I'm concerned, I mean, I love cannabis. It's like, I still find it fascinating. I still love investing in the sector. But if you really want to talk about blue sky and something that's
I think it's going to be very interesting going forward to see how some of these smaller companies are going to raise money, right? Because I know some of these companies are sort of up against probably 2 to 4 quarters away from really getting low on their cash reserves. So, Anthony, do you have any feeling on that, on how some of the smaller companies are going to raise money going forward, or?
I mean,
they're not. Can I tell you something?
I mean, not to be ominous, but I mean, they're not. I mean, I think the smaller company, I think the smaller companies
too.
in the mid tiers and psychedelics are going to die. If you're not creating any value around your IP and you're not furthering your research and really have your head down and honed in on what you're doing, and you run out of money, no one's going to come for you. I mean, there's not going to be 12 psilocybin-based drugs. Atai owns the pipes. Compass is in the lead. MindMed and Cybin are pretty close. No one's going to invest $10 million into a company that doesn't have promising results when they know it's going to take another 100 to get it across the finish line. I think it's going to be a 10-car pileup.
A prominent CEO from one of the leading companies in the space told me that back in January of this year, there were as many as 400 to 500 companies in this space that were looking to go public this year. That is now down to 40. So that's an indication as to where we are and how, okay, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Where are we with this industry and what works and what doesn't? But I think one thing's for sure is that people are finally understanding that the way psychedelic stocks trade compared to cannabis, and I know it attracts kind of that same audience, they're really starting to separate themselves as far as how one works versus the other.
Oh, yeah.
We had a lot to talk about and we covered a lot.
Oh, yeah.
We could probably sit here and talk a little bit more, but let's get to our lightning round. It is time for the lightning round, and we need some picks because the markets that we're covering or the industries we're covering, there's some excitement. So let's begin. Anthony, your first pick of the week, what is it?
All right, my number one pick this week is Flowcoin, FLOW. It is a competing blockchain to Ethereum. It's the blockchain that's powering Dapper Labs and projects such as NBA Top Shot. It's gaining traction with brands. It's insanely undervalued, and people don't even realize you can buy the coin right now. So as a hedge against
Great
Ethereum
choice.
and
Ben,
Solana,
your first pick.
I'm building a position in Flow, FLOW.
I would have to say, perhaps MSOs, if you can get like a good sell-off to start the week, or maybe some of this, a lot of the pumpage that has been happening sort of caves in to start. Maybe buy dips might be a good thing to do. I think MSOs has potential to go to, say, perhaps the 35 area over this week, or perhaps in the next week, which would be a nice return, especially if you're buying something like options, right?
Anthony, second pick.
Trulieve. They've gotten beat up arguably the most out of any of the MSOs. Meanwhile, you're finally going to get a real snapshot of what harvest is going to look like on their balance sheet, fully integrated, after this quarter. And I mean, I'm trusting the 800-pound gorilla going in earnest.
Ben, your second pick.
To ride the rest of the momentum we're seeing in the MSOs. So I'm going
it's
Trulieve.
Interesting. Maybe Revive Therapeutics. I know this is something we've revisited quite a few times. It's sort of at a trough point now. It's dropped about perhaps 20% on sort of drifting a lower volume over the past couple weeks. But there's still a lot of interest in this name. It's very highly speculative, so by no means put your whole life savings into it, or just a small portion of your spec capital. But it's a risk reward play, and it seems to be gaining a lot of traction. Article in Forbes this week, so something to look out for if you want to carry a small spec position. Maybe Revive around these levels is pretty good.
Interesting with the news about COVID out of the UK, Europe, even in Russia. They had one of the deadliest days ever since COVID has launched. So as we get into these colder months, it appears that, this virus is never going away, but the opportunity for antiviral drugs outside of vaccines, because you bring up Revive, Ben, to me, that is going to have to be put in fast forward mode for development over the next few months, I would think. But curious to see how that's going to unfold, because like I said, this whole virus thing is starting to collect steam again, with making headlines across the world.
See, it all comes down to the data, right? It all comes down to, and the data is blinded, so no one really knows how that's all going to turn out. So, it's fraught with risk, as we saw with Appley Therapeutics, who was also developing a phase 3 for COVID, early COVID. They did not show statistical significance in the results, and they shed about 60%. So it's
huge.
Navir.
But I keep hearing about butylamine with Revive being a lot more effective drug. And as you said, we've had biomedical from the Revive Therapeutics, and who's got a rich background in clinical trials. And we'll actually be having another interview coming up with him this week. But he's not surprised by the results from Appley, and he still feels very, very strong with how butylamine will perform in these trials.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. I agree with Biomedical Trader. I think he's a very great source of information, and I tend to believe with his thesis. So in that case, it's a good spec position to perhaps get in, because the risk reward is pretty high at this point. But obviously you can't go all in anything in a phase 3. It doesn't matter what sector you're playing, because there's always that risk there.
Yeah.
But these levels seem to be pretty good for maybe taking a spec position, I think.
Gents, it's Sunday, and today is the day the Detroit Lions will get their first victory of the season.
You sure about that?
Am I crazy? Big Ben's out.
I mean, you could be right. I slammed the Ravens on Thursday night, and the Dolphins completely stuck it to me.
It's that part of the season where anything that makes sense doesn't make sense. So I'm going Lions. Who's my top 5 picks? I've got the Bills covering the spread in New York. That's a little risky, but I think Bills are coming off a tough loss against the Jags, so I think the Bills will cover. I think the Titans will win by at least a field goal at home to the Saints. I pick I'm picking
Alvin,
the Cowboys by a
Alvin
touchdown
Kamara.
at home against the Falcons. I don't know what that was last week. I saw a Cowboys fan while I was sipping some drinks at the Clevelander in South Beach last week. What a scenery that was, too. I won't say, boys, but you say that's a tourist trap, Anthony. But I saw this Cowboys fan. He was shaking his head. I had my Cowboy stuff on. He was on his phone. I said, brother, what is going on today? And he had the best answer in 3 words: any given Sunday. And that's the truth. Any given Sunday. Picks? You guys got any gems that you want to share?
Yeah.
Smart.
I haven't looked.
Smart.
Survivor. I got Buccaneers.
NFTs
I got Cardinals, and I got the Bills.
Yeah, they'll win
on
big.
Survivor. So I think this year to date I'm 13-0. Although I'm picking a lot of good teams, so that's not too much of a surprise. On the spread, I'm 6-3. My one pick this week is San Diego -3. Let's see what happens. Hopefully, we get this by the time this comes out. I think this game's already going to have been played, but for the record, I'm going to say San Diego -3.
Cam Newton back in Carolina.
Oh, they finally gave up on Sam Darnold, After
I like that.
Well, he's injured.
Oh, is he? Oh.
I like that he's on IR with a shoulder injury, but I like a healthy Christian
Cam
McCaffrey.
Newton, huh?
I like a healthy
I don't know
Christian
about him
McCaffrey and Cam Newton.
That's like bringing back the
girlfriend. You're not going to see
lonely.
MVP Cam, but I think it could work.
Gents, let's touch base next couple days.
Correct.
Okay, take care.
All right, thanks, guys. Hopefully, we got through it
All right, guys.
this week, but
sounds good. Talk soon.